Good evening, this is Mark Weiss with the news. Political wrangling between the coalition parties today prevented the Ministerial Legislative Committee from approving a number of bills. One would have repealed the 2005 Disengagement Law in northern Samaria that allowed for a destruction of 4 settlements there. The bill would rescind the military order barring Israelis from entering the sites where Homesh, Sa-Nur, Ganim and Kadim once stood. Right-wing politicians and settlers hoped that the legislation would pave the way to rebuilding the 4 communities. But the legislation hit a snag after the political fight broke out between Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked from the Jewish Home and Coalition Chair, Knesset member David Bitan from the Likud. As a result, almost all private members' bills, such as this one sponsored by Jewish Home Knesset member Shuli Mualem-Refaeli, were postponed for a week. Mualem-Refaeli said the time had come to pass the legislation. She said the 2005 evacuation had no political or security justification, and the public understands this very well. We spoke with David Ivri from the settlement of Kfar Tapuach in northern Samaria about the campaign to re-establish the 4 communities.
In the summer of 2005, the government of Israel carried out the disengagement. The disengagement of Gaza is very well known, but people might not be aware of the fact that at the same time, the government evacuated and destroyed 4 Jewish communities in the northern Shomron, Ganim, Kadim, Sa-Nur, and Homesh. And these areas in the northern Shomron, where the Jewish towns were destroyed and removed, the area was not given over to the Palestinian Authority, as was done in Gaza. So the area is still under Israel's control. It's considered areas B and C, but the Jews were evacuated.
Now, what has happened in the interim period since? Have the families settled in other locations, or are they waiting and ready to go back to their homes?
The communities of the Sa-Nur and Homesh, which are on road number 60, which is a road that connects the northern Shomron to the center Shomron, many of the residents of those 2 communities relocated temporarily to a nearby town, a Jewish town called Shaveh Shomron, and they established a neighborhood called Shchunat HaMigurashim, the neighborhood of the expelled. From that place, they can see the site of Homesh, and they have been active since that time, working towards returning and reestablishing their homes in Homesh and Sa-Nur.
And they are ready now, if the government decides indeed that they can go back, they're ready to move back en masse?
Yes. These families have dedicated their efforts to reestablishing their homes, and they regularly lobby the government to correct the misjustice that was done to them in 2005 and to allow them to return and rebuild their homes at the site of their towns that were demolished.
Are there other activists ready and willing to rejoin them to reestablish these communities?
Yes, it's interesting to point out that since 2005, there has been a yeshiva that operates at the site of Homesh. Although the government and the authorities do not permit Jews to enter that area, these yeshiva students, members of this group of Homesh and Sa-Nur, sneak in on back roads to Homesh every day and sit in the open air and study Torah.
Have there been any attempts by Palestinians in these areas to move into the communities that were destroyed?
No, not really, not too much. The towns were totally destroyed, and as I mentioned earlier, they're still under Israeli authority. So the Palestinian Authority does not have the powers to allow residents to build in these places.
Now, the government was supposed to decide today what to do with these communities. However, wrangling, arguments between the Likud and the Jewish Home Party prevented this from happening. Were you disappointed by this?
Well, I think it's a process, and we're definitely moving forward. that we've reached a stage where the elected officials are submitting a bill to retract the disengagement of northern Shomron. Of course, we're disappointed that it did not go through today, but we believe that it's a process, and ultimately, we believe that the government will retract the disengagement law in northern Shomron and allow the residents to re-establish their homes.
And from your perspective, what kind of message will this send to the international community?
I think that it's time that the international community realized that the Oslo process was a huge mistake. Establishing the Palestinian Authority was a mistake, and dividing Judea and Samaria into areas A, B, and C were all a great mistake, and this all needs to be reversed.
David Ivri from the settlement of Kfar Tapuach in northern Samaria. Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon from Kulanu and